Today on the Pro-Life Podcast, you've seen the dress-up acts in front of Supreme Court justices' houses, but what does The Handmaid's Tale really mean? And one of their actresses has something to say about the stigma Hollywood puts on young moms. We need to talk about this. Let's get started. Happy Tuesday, Pro-Life family. Pull up a chair, grab your coffee, got my coffee. The irony to discuss today. First, I'm going to introduce my awesome friends around the table. Kim Schwartz, Communications Director. Veronica Arnold-Smither, Education Associate and awesome person.
Oh, thanks.
And Emily Cook, General Counsel and keeps me out of trouble. Brent Klingerman, IT Director. This is such a weird, bizarro world story. We keep using this term lately, but everything feels like bizarro world. So an actress from Handmaid's Tale has this normal want to have a family. And she feels very stigmatized because of Hollywood culture.
And it's ironic because the leftists use Handmaid's Tale as their poster, their identity for the pro-abortion movement. But
this is the main character, right?
Yeah, the main actress.
She's an actress in the show. I don't know if she's one of them. We were discussing earlier, me and Peter, who's running our camera, how we would both rather spill coffee on ourselves and probably watch this show. It kind of falls in that category of that, The Bachelorette. It's why?
Oh.
But
the actress named Sydney Sweeney, right?
Uh-huh.
Correct.
Yeah, so she wants to have a baby, and she's talking about Hollywood culture is very discouraging of that. And I mean, that's a real bummer. Everybody should be able to have a good maternity leave and trust that you're not going to get fired and trust that it's not going to ruin your career and all that.
Be able to get another
it's a bummer.
job and
yeah.
thing.
I guess the irony is that a lot of the leftists use the Handmaid's Tale as this prop to protest pro-lifers, and they'll show up in their, the red cape and the white hat.
They're like Red Riding Hood cosplay thing.
I know, it cracks me up. So weird. But it's so funny. I was talking to a teenage friend of mine, sweet Kimberly, and not Kim, but Kimberly.
I'm not 17 anymore.
Yeah.
So.
And I was like, okay, so tell me, what do you think about The Handmaid's Tale after all this story came out? And she's like, I think it's so ironic that the leftists like to dress up in these costumes. They don't realize the joke is on them. And I was like, oh, what do you mean? And so she was telling me all about this show because she loves it. And she was saying, well, it's all about these fake Christians who become totalitarians. They're super communist, and they take over the United States, and they force women to bear children for them because there's this fertility crisis. And so they rape these women, and they have this super creepy ritual involving the Bible while they do so. And so this is not real Christianity, right? This is totally fake, obsessive, perhaps satanic occult, using the Bible, raping women, impregnating them so that the commanders can have their baby. But what's so crazy in the real United States is the leftists like to dress up in these costumes and show up at pro-life events or protest at churches.
They're outside of Amy Coney Barrett's house, and all the Supreme Court justices dressed as the little Red Riding Hood, red cape, and the white bonnet and everything like that.
So the current modern day United States leftists who are communist and proud of it, and they literally call themselves
we had communists
or socialists
crash our event.
Yeah, and then they're happy about it. And they don't realize what the actual message of the show is that communism is bad, rape is bad, forced surrogacy is bad, abortion is bad. There's a whole episode of one of the main characters she's pregnant, but she views the baby as her own. She was impregnated, but she wants to save her baby, and she's afraid that she's going to be forced to abort because they no longer this is a weird, complicated situation where she's at risk of being forced to abort. So she's trying to rescue her own unborn child, and yet the leftist pro-choicers of today do not understand this message. I'm like, did you actually pay attention to the message of the show? They just think that basically pro-lifers are forcing women to have babies. I'm like, no. We also agree that rape is bad.
Yes.
Forced surrogacy's bad, and abortion's really, really bad. So they clearly did not pay attention to the message of the show.
Well, I mean, the whole bringing that show back into light was because the actress, what is it? She told a reporter or did a news interview, and she said, "I want to have a family. I've always wanted to be a mom, to be a young mom." She said, "But I'm worried about how the industry puts stigma on young women and children and looks at them in a different light."
Yeah.
I mean,
That's awesome.
coming from a culture, from a segment of our society that purports to be all about the women's rights and equality, and I mean, unless you want to have a baby,
Right, because it's like career. But if you have a baby, like that's all gone. No way, you cannot do both at all. And that is not the pro-life perspective. That's not the Christian perspective. Like, it's the leftists, the pro-abortion crowd that are saying that. So this whole stigma that the Handmaid's Tale actress is facing, it's just even more ironic because they're misinterpreting the show. They're forcing their own worldview onto the people that they're trying to say that they're helping, and it's having the opposite effect.
I mean, if they really believed in choice, or let's say the Hollywood culture, if they really wanted to uphold their value of choice, this woman, Sydney Sweeney, should be encouraged to have a choice, to have a baby and then return to her career. Yeah, but that's clearly not what's happening here. It's like she hit the nail on the head. She noticed a real problem in her community, and now she's exposing it, and hopefully not at the peril of her career, because her bosses might be like, "You're out." I mean, look what they did to so many other actors who, point out a problem in the culture. They're like, "You're out, you're fired."
Gina Carano.
Yeah, poor Gina. Well, not poor anymore. She's rich again.
Well,
she's fine.
Isn't this the same culture that gave us, was it Michelle Williams when she won her award? How she couldn't have made it in her career without her abortion.
I know.
Yeah.
It was like,
I miss
what?
Yeah, on stage during the award shows, saying, "Thank God for abortion. I wouldn't be here without it."
Yeah.
Awful.
Yeah.
And the real issue there is she was in a career field, in a society that made it to be where she couldn't work if she had a child.
Yep.
Yeah.
And yet they want to just stand on their little soapbox and tell all the rest of us how stupid we are and how we ought to live our lives. So.
And how empowered they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thanks, Hollywood.
Yeah. So weird.
Yeah. I think another big part of this, the whole Handmaid's Tale thing too, is just the idea of treating women as property. And a big place that we see that too is not just in the issue of abortion, and talking about that one episode where the woman is afraid that the men are going to force her to have an abortion, but also in the issue of like surrogacy, and how that's an area modern day that the Handmaid's Tale people really should be protesting, because that's where women are treated as property. Women who might not have high income, they can say, well, I can just donate my eggs and get a big chunk of change from that. And that's just so
Or I can,
my
allow
body.
someone to pay for my uterus, pay for the use of my uterus. It's like, this is weird. I guess they think that because the women have a choice in the matter, I get to choose to sell my uterus for this amount of time, that it's fine because it's all about choice. But I think it's just complete exploitation.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, it's rough.
So weird. So weird. This feels like a really good place to transition into another story we wanted to discuss. Our friends over at Babylon Bee, their sister site, Not the Bee, has an article recently about a couple of gay men picking the egg donor for their child, kind of like they're picking out a dog in a pet store. Yeah. We can link to the video and stuff. It is weird to watch the kind of describing the sort of person they're looking for, the physical attributes. Oh, we want her to be artsy, and we want her to look like this.
Big smile,
good hair.
Look like a kind person in general, and it's like, what does a kind person look like? How do you get to pick what characteristics you're going to have to make your baby look like a kind person?
Well, the way y'all are describing it is, it sounds even not that bad. It's actually way worse if you watch the video. Like, they They are very creepy about it. I mean,
it's
How
weird
about the
if you watch
interviewing?
it. Yeah.
Talk about the interviews that they did with applicants.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just
To be the egg donor. And so there's two I want to point out, viewers. In this idea, there can be two different. You've got your egg donor. You've got a woman whose egg it is that is fertilized and results in an embryo.
Biology 101. Yes, they have one required half.
Exactly. And then you have surrogate. So they can sometimes be the surrogate is the gestational carrier, the woman who actually is pregnant and carries and gives birth to the baby. And those can be the same or they cannot be the same. Right. And you kind of get into this whole, crazy murky end. But in this story, they were deciding, these guys were deciding who was going to be egg donor, aka the biological mother of their child. Because you got to have one of those, remember?
I mean,
that hasn't changed
the
since Adam and Eve.
Yep.
egg donating person.
Yes.
and I guess, I mean, it's no secret that people would want to look for certain attributes in an egg donor or a sperm donor. That this has been going on for
looking
decades.
for a spouse, we look for certain traits, we find somebody we're compatible with.
That's true.
It's like, I mean, it's what we do as normal humans when we're pursuing a long-term relationship.
Yeah, but that's like normal and good.
Right.
Whereas, looking for the attributes of the mother of your child who is never going to be part of that child's life. And also you're involving a monetary exchange for a physical body part. Like, it's so weird.
I
This is
like
the
your
real
appearance
Handmaid's
and
Tale.
personality. Here's some money. Like, that's creepy.
So exploitative. It's so disrespectful of humans in general.
Correct.
It's like this is humans are not meant to be part of a monetary exchange ever. And this is
so weird.
It's very weird. But I guess when I say it's no secret that they're going to be looking for specific attributes, it's like we all knew this was happening, but the way that these guys on TikTok or whatever are describing it, it's just like they're in the open and it's celebrated. It was kind of like a secret before, you go into the sperm bank or the egg bank and you probably look through like a little book of details about the donor. But now it's like, we're going to make a cute video about it and be creepy.
And they're holding about a 5 or 6 month old child, and this is the product of our shopping. And you're like, what?
I couldn't quite tell in one part of the video. It sounded like they said the word "it" referring to their baby. We wanted it to have eyes. It could have been her. They could have said her, but I'm pretty sure they said it. And that is one of my biggest pet peeves when talking about children. And pro-lifers do this too. I know many people who say the word "it" in regard to the unborn child, even a newborn. Like, I've heard people say like, "Oh yeah, when it's born," or "I need to bring this over for the baby," or something like that, and they'll say "it," and it drives me insane.
Me too. I correct people all the time.
Thank you. Yes.
I have a friend, they're pregnant right now, and he keeps calling. Sometimes he'll refer. So, when it's born, it's born. It's like, stop! It is your son, the
Yes,
baby.
the
I'm
baby.
sorry. You're right. You're right.
Yeah. And they might not mean any harm.
They don't mean any harm at all.
But
it's still great on my nerves.
It's a slippery slope. If you have to be careful how you describe a person and not. I mean, it's all that people first language, which was started by probably some fairly progressive people, but it's a good principle. It's like describe a person for who they are and not maybe like by the clothes that they're wearing, or if you don't know the gender, don't say it.
Right.
Say
He or
the
she.
baby, he or she,
The child.
the child. Like there's so many other ways that you can
Protect the
positively and humanely describe someone.
Yeah, exactly. But this just underscores the idea that in surrogacy especially, children are treated like a commodity. Like this is something that people can go online shopping for, of like swipe, 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 like on Tinder or whatever. And it's like, oh yeah, this person, maybe I'll use her eggs. And then like you're just treating the child as a commodity, something that you can purchase and have for your own. But that's not what the relationship was designed to be. Like God created the family and he designed the family to be a certain way on purpose, so that way it's for the individual's flourishing and society flourishing too.
Yeah. I've heard people say that they have a right to have a baby, especially someone who is struggling with infertility and maybe they're not very well educated in their faith, and they'll say something, well, I have a right to have a baby, just because it's easy for, someone with good fertility. That's not fair. Like I deserve this too. And that's really hard because I definitely know a lot of people who struggle with infertility, and that's a real cross to bear. But we have to remember that we don't have a right to have a baby. A baby's a gift. A baby's a gift. And that's fine to seek corrective medicine to try to have a baby, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't mean that you aren't getting what you deserve, or you're not obtaining a right. Like, we don't have a right to have a child. It's a gift.
And Christians especially should look at it in a different way than what society says it is. I mean, we should have a different worldview and a different way that we process that. Like you said, children are a gift from the Lord, and when we decide, do we really believe the Lord's in control of our life or not?
Yeah. And he might, sadly, it's a true sadness that some people might not ever be able to have their own biological child. And then we might be thinking, well, why wouldn't God give me that gift? Well, maybe he has a different plan for you. Maybe he really wants you to adopt. Or maybe he really wants you to be super involved in your community and do something else. And that's going to be, it's a long journey to accept that.
That we're not always going to like the crosses that are ours to bear.
I have a good friend who has been married for a long time and they're never able to have children. So eventually they did seek a lot of corrective medicine, and they got the hard answer that they will never be able to. And their response to that was so incredibly beautiful. I thought they were going to go through like a fairly long mourning period, and I was going to try to be there for them and comfort them and all that. But it was just like a couple months, and they were like, you know what, we prayed a lot, and we just realized that like God is with us, and he has a plan for us, and it may never involve children. And they just like went back to like super involved in their church and super involved with their nieces and nephews. And I was like, are y'all okay? Like, really? I'm so surprised. And they were like, no, actually, we're really okay. Like, yeah, it's sad, but like, this is God's will. And I was like, oh my goodness, what bravery. Like, what
Praise
acceptance. Yeah. It was beautiful to see and motivating. And because I was even at one point, I was trying to decide like how to tell them with a previous pregnancy like that I was pregnant. I was like, I want to be really sensitive about this. And she's like, you don't have to worry about that. I was like, oh, I love you.
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah. But that takes so much bravery and acceptance of God's will, Anyway, yeah, children are a gift.
Children are a gift. So we need to take a break really quick. We have some other information we need to share, upcoming events and things that we want to tell you guys about. So we will put that information here. Nathan, you can just put it right. Links right here. Right here.
Save the date for Boots on the Ground. It's an awesome pro-life conference coming up January 28th and 29th. Come to Austin, Texas with us to march to the Capitol, to celebrate the end of Roe v. Wade, to commemorate Roe v. Wade, and to learn from expert pro-life speakers on how to keep Texas pro-life forever. Come to Austin with us and hear from Ryan Baumberger, our keynote speaker who shares his personal story, and so much more. Book your tickets today, bootsonthegroundtx.com. See you in January.
The Supreme Court just overturned Roe v. Wade. This is a historic moment. Now we have a bold, groundbreaking agenda for the next steps. First, we have to enforce our laws and make sure liberal district attorneys don't give abortionists a free pass. Second, we need to expand the life-saving alternatives to abortion program. And third, we need to save hospital patients. Do you believe in this vision? Go to texasrighttolife.com/stand to donate now and save lives.
Welcome back, family. I want to preface this topic here with it's going to be a little dark. You may, if the younger ears are listening, you may want to watch this later. Listen to it later. Timestamps will be in the description if you want to go ahead and skip to later content. So we wanted to discuss this. We talked about this late last week as we're planning. So it seems that there was a 10-year-old rape victim, and it feels like there's a whole bunch of doctors involved in kind of covering up the rapist's actions here in making a case for, well, she just needs an abortion. And it's all the focus is on that she's 10, she's pregnant, she needs an abortion. nothing being focused on the literal cover-up of she was raped.
Yeah, they failed to
And-
report it.
Yeah.
And, subsequent reports came out saying that the abortionist had actually lied, had put that in their little internal report that the perpetrator was a minor. Okay. And he wasn't. He was 27 years old. And then used the story not as a way to get help for her, but as a way to grandstand on this political climate and say, and use this as an example or as a reason why America needs abortion on demand through all 9 months of pregnancy.
It feels similar to what they did the first time.
Right, with Norma McCorvey.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, I thought about the same thing. Poor Norma McCorvey, who was Jane Roe in Roe v. Wade, she was pregnant and sadly at the time was addicted to a lot of drugs and alcohol and signed paperwork that she didn't know what it meant. No, her lawyers did not explain it to her, and they used her as a pawn in their agenda to pass Roe v. Wade.
Right.
And Norma McCorvey later learned what happened and was really upset, and she was pro-life, and she worked the rest of her life to try to save babies.
I want to make it really clear to our listeners too, when you're having to defend against hard issues like this, it's important to remember. I mean, what you'll see, these situations are what the media will make you believe is prevalent, right?
This is the majority of cases,
Oh,
I'm
yes,
sure,
all
right?
the abortion cases are
Correct.
10 and 11-year-olds.
And while that's still not the acceptable answer, it is important to know that for decades, abortion for reasons of rape or incest or life of the mother accounted for less than 3% of abortions nationwide routinely. And that the median age of the age demographic of women who sought and received abortions in America consistently has been 20 to 24-year-olds. So,
Yeah, that is all true and very good to know. But the follow-up retort is always going to be, well, what about this? It really happened to her, which is, it's a good retort. This is a real case of a real sweet little girl who was raped, and her mother probably took her to the doctor. The doctor, who was super pro-choice, used this girl as a pawn in her agenda, drove her across state lines, even though it wasn't necessary, in order to make a statement, like stick it to the man. We had to drive her across state lines to get an abortion, even though that wasn't necessary, and failed to report the rapist. And then journalists showed up to the mother's house to try to figure out the deets of what's going on and wasn't able to get much information because the mother was afraid of getting deported. The rapist is also an illegal immigrant. And it just gets messier and messier. Like, they could have helped this young girl. And I'm glad at least that she is being protected from the media. She personally, like, we don't even know her name.
Yeah, we don't.
And maybe that's a good thing. Like, I hope this girl is able to stay safe from, like, media pounding on her door. But the reality is that she was not rushed to be helped. She was rushed across state lines to get an abortion and was used as a pawn in a political agenda. And it's like, who is actually looking after her?
Right.
and any consideration about what the psychological effects of an abortion go on a 10-year-old? I mean, on any
That's
woman.
a lot of trauma.
You can't just ignore that exists.
Yeah.
Right. And the fact it took so long to actually figure out who the guy was and to report him and get him in jail. Like, he's in jail now. But it took a couple weeks because everybody was afraid to talk about it.
Now, also, you're saying, let's talk about the doctors covering this up. Now, I'm not a lawyer, and I kind of maybe sort of act like one on a podcast sometimes, maybe. It's really, I'm going to defer to you, because that is your profession. If you fail to report the crime, doesn't that make you an accessory?
Lawyers always say depends.
Good job.
Good answer.
Favorite answer.
Yeah.
Mostly, I have no idea what the state law is and what was that, Kansas or
Ohio.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
what the
I have
exact
no idea. I'm sure
details
there's
of-
some federal law that overarches that requires you to be a mandatory reporter. But again, like we've seen with the abortion industry, rules don't apply to them.
Well, and some pro-lifers would definitely say, well, but what should we have done then with this girl? Like, is this the one exception where maybe it would have been better for her to have an abortion? And I would say, first of all, abortion is never the answer.
Right.
It's good that you're concerned. You know, this girl is so young, and yeah, it's possible the pregnancy could have taken a toll on her body. But the good news is that if she had already reached puberty and was menstruating, that her body probably was going to be okay. And that it absolutely should never have happened. But the reality is that, like, she probably could have delivered to term, carried to term, and delivered and been perfectly fine. And then what? Like, we'll probably place the child for adoption, because clearly a 10-year-old cannot raise a baby. But biologically, she probably would have been just fine, especially if she had received good health care, which she clearly wasn't.
Yeah.
And provide counseling for her to deal with all of everything, ongoing counseling and trauma and healing from everything that she had went through.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you look at studies for abortion in cases of rape, they actually show that women who choose life after being a victim of sexual assault, they have better healing outcomes in the long term than women who aborted. And that's a really important piece that we have to acknowledge, because our heart breaks for that woman who survived a very terrible crime of sexual assault. And even this young girl who, I can't imagine the torture that she has gone through. Abortion doesn't take that away. Abortion doesn't take that away for anyone. And I think the pro-abortion side likes to think, well, like, if she has an abortion, then the trauma is gone. She can forget. You don't forget that. The trauma is not gone.
You just stack trauma on top of trauma.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so whenever we look at what's going to be the long-term best outcome, and yes, this case is so hard to talk about because, you know, everybody has sympathy for this young girl. It's just heartbreaking and terrible. And the people who were involved, that man and the doctor, they need to face the harshest penalties that they can for what they've done to this girl. The doctor for covering it up, and the rapist who, you know, assaulted this girl, they need to face the harshest penalties under the law.
Yep.
And then we have to also look at how can we actually help this girl. It doesn't help to say, like, oh, we'll just have an abortion and the problem was gone. It's not.
Yeah. She's going to need really good health care and really good therapy. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a dark topic. It's one of the hard cases. But it's one we have to talk about. This is the other side's favorite argument. I had one of these kind of conversations actually over the weekend at another event, and it was like, you know, what if this was the case of, like, his political view and why he felt like this was a right, was, you know, in the case of rape. And I was just like, bro. Yeah, it's weird when family social gatherings turn into oh my goodness.
Well, I have a quick resource to mention. I think I might have mentioned it on one of the previous episodes of the podcast too, but there's a really awesome website called SaveThe1.com, and it's a compilation, like a database website of stories of women who have chosen life after assault, and stories of people who were conceived in rape. So depending on which of those stories you're looking for, there's like a filter you can search. And all of these people are very passionately pro-life. And the entire website is about basically don't use us as your scapegoat to legalize abortion. Basically, how dare you say that we should not exist or that our children should not exist because of rape. And a lot of them are professional pro-life speakers, and so you can book them to speak. And because of this work, I've heard like dozens of them speak. Awesome. So most average people in the United States probably have not actually heard a lecture from a person who chose life after rape. I've heard dozens of them. So I've gotten to meet these people and shake their hands. And like Ryan Baumberger is one of those speakers. He was conceived in rape, and he's also on this website, and he's a professional speaker. He's going to be at Boots on the Ground and talk about how, rape should never be the scapegoat for legalizing abortion, and that even though his mother lived through hell, like she chose life for him, and that was part of her healing, and he's here because of it. Like that's amazing. So.
I've heard several of these kind of amazing stories through Boots on the Ground. Having worked with that and worked those events, because it was when we originally started, it was a college age thing. So I wouldn't have gone other than working the events. And then when I started working, I was like, these are really awesome stories and awesome speakers.
Yeah, they'll make you cry because it's this idea of like a trauma, a very powerful and terrible story in the beginning, and then seeing how God used that and how God worked through that, and how the children who were conceived in rape have valuable lives and they love their lives, and how the women have, even though they suffered this great and terrible sexual assault, that they found healing from that and they found strength after that. And a lot of times that having the child and being pregnant and saying, this is my child, not the rapist child, this is my child, how that brought them healing.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, guys. So if you were waiting for the timestamp, here it is. You can come back or whatever. So I do want to end with a little bit happier note, because that was dark, you guys. Okay. Recently, you have finished a little article, Emily. Little amicus brief, as they call them in the business.
It's called an amicus letter because it's a lot shorter. Okay. A brief is very long, which we've done those too.
That sounds backwards. An amicus letter is short, but an amicus brief is long.
I have never even thought about that, but you are exactly right. That is funny now.
Okay.
I should tell my lawyer friends that. Yes, so right now in Texas, there is a dispute between the abortion industry is trying to say that the pre-Roe statute, so the statutes in Texas that criminalized abortion are still on the books, and that is what is currently being enforced in Texas while we await the trigger ban to go into effect, which goes into effect 30 days after judgment was
August
entered.
25th.
There you go.
August 25th. We have a date now.
In English, it's in August 25th.
Okay. And so the argument is that because the trigger ban was passed by the legislature, they, by implication, repealed the pre-Roe statutes. Okay.
That's what the abortion industry is trying to say, is like, oh, we've had this law that was before Roe v. Wade, this abortion ban before Roe v. Wade, but since we passed other pro-life bills since then, that implies that you repealed that other one.
Wow.
And it's just kind of wonky.
So is that
legal
sort of
doctrine.
Like saying, well, speeding is a thing and it has these penalties, but because you passed another law that makes the penalties steeper on speeding, like for this window of time, that speeding's okay?
Kind of.
That.
Kind of.
Okay.
I'll use that next time I get stopped.
So everyone remembers in
Abortion
the heartbeat
logic.
In the heartbeat law, we've got the aiding and abetting, where if you help procure an illegal abortion, then you can be liable for a civil penalty as well.
Okay, yes.
Okay, well, in the pre-Roe statutes, it kind of had, we call it the accomplice liability, because it had criminal liability for an accomplice. That accomplice liability is not in the trigger ban. Okay, so our argument is, and that's the part that we're trying to help save, just because the legislature didn't address it in the trigger ban because it was already adequately addressed over here in the pre-Roe statutes. They just chose to, instead of changing it to here the law says A, B, C, we're going to add D and E over here, and that does not negate A, B, and C over here.
Yeah.
So we filed that at the Texas Supreme Court on Friday.
So theoretically, there's no window of time where I can drive as fast as I want.
Nope. Not yet, sadly.
That's so cool. Have you ever
depends.
filed a brief? Oh my gosh. Have you ever filed anything with the Supreme Court before?
Yes.
Oh. So many
Look at you.
times.
It's exciting.
So fancy.
It's crazy.
So professional.
But I mean, it's been a little over a month since Roe v. Wade was overturned. And do y'all want to guess how many lives have been saved per day since then?
Pray tell.
167 per day for the last 30 plus days, which means we're well over 5,000 lives saved since Roe was overturned. And that's with the combination of the Heartbeat Act and with the pre-Roe statutes taking effect immediately when Roe was overturned. And so there was a little bit of time where the abortionists thought like, well, yeah, we can do whatever we want. So they kept doing abortions for a few days. And then Attorney General Ken Paxton kind of cracked down a little bit, and Supreme Court of Texas stepped in. So since then, we have been monitoring and seeing if the abortion clinics are following the law. And right now, it looks like every abortion clinic in Texas is following the law and not committing abortions. A lot of them are closing up shop, and some of them are moving out of state. So we're going to have to make sure we spread the pro-life message other places too. But 167 babies a day.
That's awesome.
That's stinking amazing.
Yep.
Well, there is a happy note to end the day on.
Yes.
167 kids a day. Yes. Anyways, Pro-Life family, thank you for watching and sharing this with your family, talking to your friends and neighbors about this. That's how we're going to change the culture and save lives. Until then, we will see you guys next week. We love you. Happy Tuesday.